All right, this is Dustin Baker on VikesNow, the Friday, June 17th edition, and I am on day 3 or so of COVID, and I spoke too soon. I jinxed it. Yesterday I said I didn't lose my taste buds, and this morning, boom, no taste, no smell. And the shitty part is allegedly that can last for a long time, and that stinks. So I'll keep you guys posted. Not that you care, but yeah, navigating COVID here. Still recording Vikes now, and the topic we're going to navigate today is why there is more optimism about the Vikings offensive line this go around than in the past 4 or 5 years, and you kind of start to think, well, it's just because there's new coaches, it's going to be different. And that's not good enough for me. So I dug into the reasons why. And admittedly, this was prompted by Pro Football Focus releasing its offensive line pecking order going into 2022. And the Vikings ranked number 19th. And most franchises would be like, oh, shit, we're at 19th. That ain't good. But for the purple team, we're like, ooh, we're coming. Number 19. That isn't number 30. So that means things are trending upward. So off the steam of a little bit of 19th ranked optimism about the Vikings offensive line, I want to go through the reasons why it feels like the 2022 version of the offensive trenches will be better. To set the table, so the Vikings are in this very strange offensive line world where they are set on the edges at left tackle with Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech, and right tackle, Brian O'Neill, who's been with the team since 2018. And usually when you have the tackles figured out, most franchises, fan bases are like, oh yeah, we got a good offensive line. We've got Darrisaw and O'Neill. But we're not like that because the innards of the offensive line have plagued the team since arguably the start of 2018. So I want to make sure that that's out there in the open, that the hard part about fixing an offensive line, that work is done. We already know O'Neill is good, and I'll suffice it some down season that he has. Like, that side is good. And then Darrisaw, when he was healthy last year, got up and running as a rookie. And if he doesn't have Matt Khalil-itis, he'll be fine on the left side, the more important side. So it's this problem. And admittedly, again, Darrisaw is a newfound solution, so this new problem about not having a peace of mind when you have two good tackles being weird, it is strange because that's all you should really need. And then the anonymous guys in the middle should do enough not to mess up, and then the offensive line should tick. But that's not how it works for the Minnesota Vikings, who have been plagued by porous pass protection since the departure of Bryant McKinnie and Steve Hutchinson. So at least there's that. You have two left tackles that you don't have to, or two tackles, that you don't have to go out and find. Those are already in the house, and those are set. But the reason that out of the gate, the shots fired moment, that this offensive line hodgepodge feels different than years past is because in March, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah signed two guards, or two offensive linemen that we think will play guard, and that's Chris Reed from Indianapolis and Jesse Davis from the Miami Dolphins. And in years past, it was a solution like Dozier, a career reservist player coming over from the Jets, or drafting Drew Samia in the 4th round, who was mean and nasty, and then flat out was nasty that you didn't want to watch him anymore. So they addressed the problem. I'm guessing they looked at the numbers over the past few years and be like, why can't they figure this out again? They run the ball all the time with Dalvin Cook, and they play defense, but they don't do anything about the offensive trenches. I'm hoping somebody in the room said that. And then they went an affordable option and signed Reed and Davis. Now, I have no idea if Reed and Davis are going to be any good. Reed has a pedigree for being good in what we need him to be good, and that's pass protection. And he's a true blue guard. Jesse Davis, I don't really understand. He's got all kinds of starting experience with the Dolphins, but it's at tackle. So evidently, he's just versatile, which is what the Vikings like to do anyway, and drives Bryant McKinnie nuts on my other show, dragging these dudes all over the offensive line. But it's fundamentally different because their approach, at least out of the gate in free agency, was dual-pronged. That, we're not going to start Oli Udoh again. We're going to get Chris Reed in here or Jesse Davis, and may the best man win. And that was the first part of the plan. And that That was not a Zimmerian or Spielmanish plan. That was new. It was veterans. It was guys that were good and that weren't career morons. The old way of doing things was to have a half-measured solution where you would go and say, all right, well, maybe this Dozier guy, a holdover from, who was it? It wasn't the Sperano days, but he had ties to somebody within the Vikings coaching staff, and I think it was the offensive line coach. And so Dozier came over. The rest is history. Now he might start for the Bears. But the old way of doing things really didn't emphasize strong solutions in the interior part of the offensive line. It was kind of like, Dozier will work. And it doesn't feel like it's going to be that way anyway because they signed Davis and Reed. And if that wasn't enough, in the second round of the draft, the Vikings drafted Ed Ingram. Now, he hasn't signed his rookie deal yet, but when he does, it'll happen at some point. No matter what happened in free agency, he should start and he should be the fix. And then that's it. Figure out what you're going to do with Garrett Bradbury if he isn't suddenly good with a new regime. But there are now 3 ways to fix this right guard spot. Whereas in years past, you would limp in with guys that you hadn't heard of when Dozier joined the team, you hadn't heard of him. You sure know him now for the wrong reasons. And then Samia, who was a 4th-round pick that didn't quite work out. But Ingram is a 2nd-rounder, and then Davis and Reed have, oodles of snaps that they've already played in the NFL. So the approach is 3-pronged. It's not a half-assed thing. After that, then indeed, yes, there is the mentality of a new coaching staff. When I first started the show, I think I said a couple times that if we are here in October recording the show and you guys are listening to me and I am bemoaning the right guard position about how they can't protect Kirk Cousins, that will mean that 2 coaching staffs year after year have failed. They don't know how to coach right guards, and then arguably center if you want to loop that in too. I think right now the fashionable thing is to blame Zimmer, who wasn't an offensive line aficionado. But if we go through the same bullshit where the pass protection sucks in the middle of the offensive line, that will mean that 2 coaching staffs, regimes led by Zimmer and now O'Connell, they don't get it. That's what we'll be up against. And that I think I joked before that then you're entering the territory of a curse or a hex where something went bad a long time ago and now we're paying the piper. But there is a case to be made that new coaching staff, even with the good dudes that were in place from Cleveland, O'Neal, excuse me, that they should be difference makers. Kind of like how everything got bad when Tony Sperano died in the summer of 2018. The last time the Vikings had a decent offensive line was 2017. That's not a coincidence. The last time they had a good offensive line was the last time they got to the NFC Championship. But as soon as he passed away, so went the pass protection acumen of the offensive line. So a new coaching staff will indeed make a big deal. And then, let's say this summer, right guard, they're going to go with Jesse Davis. Or you can cancel that and say they're going to go with Ed Ingram. Pick one of those guys. And we get into September. We take on the Packers. And then we travel to Monday Night Football against the Eagles. Come home against the Bears. Go across the pond to play the Saints, which game I think I'll be at. But let's say 4 or 5 weeks into this, they chose Davis for the audition. He isn't very good. You look at his PFF, it's like 48.3. Now you have contingency plans. Ingram, Reed. You can even drag Udo in again for some snaps if you need to. We didn't have that before. It was always a Dozier and then some other pile behind him who wasn't going to be very good. Or last year, Udo with the penalties, and then they finally came to their senses and started playing the Mason Cole, but I think that was out of necessity when Bradbury was out for a game or two. But now the bet has been hedged. So long as Reed or Davis don't get cut this summer, you have backup plans so that if they get it wrong in the preseason and that Jesse Davis was a preseason hero or Ed Ingram isn't ready yet, you can pivot to one of the other 3 guys they have on the roster, whereas before it was like, nope, we're going to stick it out with Dozier The hell with yous. You're going to have to create memes, psychosis memes in the offseason to make us draft a guard. A couple other points rounding out this episode about the offensive line is that if they do make this thing serviceable, or hell, even good for once, they're doing it on a tiny budget. The Vikings spend right now the fifth least or fewest dollars on offensive linemen in the NFL. Fifth fewest. They're top heavy because they spend a lot of money on the quarterback and the running back comparatively. And then they skim on the offensive line, mainly because Brian O'Neill is the only guy who has a cap hit of more than $5 million in 2022. So all of these guys are affordable, which sort of means if they're good, you'll have them for cheap for a while before you have to pay Darisaw and then eventually figure out what the solution is at center. But if they're good or at least average, it'll be at a discount because the Vikings rank 28th in the business in offensive line spending. And then they also, for curious folks, they spend the second least dollars on the secondary, the defensive secondary. Can you believe that? The team that Mike Zimmer left spends the second fewest dollars on safeties and cornerbacks, mainly all going to Harrison Smith. Let's see. In reality, if it starts to get rotten again or it's not up to your standard of pass protection, I will say it again. Somebody, all they need to really do is fix two spots, center and right guard. Edges are fine. Ezra Cleveland played well at left guard last year. I think that's where he'll stay. But there's got to be a coach, Chris Cooper, the new offensive line coach, Wes Phillips, the offensive coordinator, Kevin O'Connell himself. There got to be folks who can figure out how to fix two spots of the offensive line because those center and right guard are the ones that have been causing the problems since Cousins arrived, pretty much. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's that for the optimism. Vikings are good with the two tackles. They have the cornerstones in an offensive line. They signed Jesse Davis and Chris Reed, veterans. They drafted Ed Ingram, so that's three solutions right there for one spot. In theory, there's a new coaching staff, and if it fails, that means that Zimmer and O'Connell can't figure out an offensive line. And then if things start to get messy, nasty, then you have contingency plans about these guys that should be hanging out on the bench waiting for their chance if they select the wrong guy going into week one. That's all I got, but I will be back to record either tomorrow or on Father's Day with the next Vikings topic. And Skol, baby.